What are some red flags in a job interview? When the interviewers straight up tell you they don't know if they can pay you when you start, because the company doesn't have an established means of income. Yeah, that was quite a surprise to hear after flying cross country for the interview. We work hard and we play hard. You will work 70 hours per week and get ducked in the ass for it because you were salaried, and for your efforts, they might buy you lunch or pizza. Also, if they are scrambling a bit, besides the boss being late, and forget who you are, that means things are likely to be disorganized. If they dodge the question why did the last person in this position leave, when it becomes immediately clear the job they are interviewing you for is the job they posted online. I asked about it and they say yeah, that's the position we want you in, but first we want you to learn the structure of the company from the ground up. So you'll start in sales and after about a year we'll move you over to pretty dumbstruck. If the people currently working there look dead inside and the smiles look like they were straight out of a high school yearbook photo, run. Are you willing to work flexible hours? For me personally, having an interview last nearly 2 hours. My boss talked at me for about an hour after my actual interview questions. Turns out he is an awful communicator because he talks far too much. We have daily meetings which should take 15 minutes but regular lasts more than an hour. He can't give a clear instruction and because he talks so much, he contradicts himself and can't keep track of what he's told us. Makes for a very difficult working environment. A black leather sofa. When the interviewer says, it is not the responsibility of the employer to provide or maintain microwaves in the lunchrooms. Purchasing microwaves and maintaining them is up to our employees. I went to one where they asked me if I ever had reported a colleague to HR, and when I said no they were like oh that's great. It's a mostly male job and weirdly enough my male friend, who was interviewed a few weeks before didn't get asked that question. Interviewed with multiple people almost all separate due to their jobs and the location. Each one of them said, in reality you work for me regardless of what the other ones say. My biggest interview red flag is when I hear we are like a family here. In my experiences, they actually were related. It led to a lot of gossip, infighting, cliques between family and non-family, family drama being brought into work, general ugliness. When I hear that now I ask for clarification. They are trying to convince you not to take on the job during the interview and explain why it sucks. If they continually refuse to be the first to offer salary amount, they're cheap and they don't value employees. Walk away. The job they are hiring and interviewing for is very different from the advertised position. How to handle confrontation. This was a dishwashing gig. Turns out all the gals in the kitchen were angry bitches. I went home crying every night. Group interviews of any kind, even if it's just you and one other person, the bigger the group the worse the turnover. Asking you to start that day usually is a bad sign. I once applied for a job in the Chinese embassy. They had red flags all over the place. My brother applied at a McDonald's I worked at once upon a time. I had been gone from there for a few years by then but he was in the market for a first job so he went where I went. At the interview the manager told him we pride ourselves on cleanliness. We try to make sure the store is perfectly clean. Is cleaning an issue for you? Something along those lines. At that same moment there was garbage strewn on the floor leading to the bathroom next to them and the bathroom itself was also disgusting as usual. I feel like that's a big red flag. Not the cleanliness per se, though that's bad too, but the fact that the manager was either delusional and had a false vision of his workplace, or he outright lied. If a boss is capable of pretending that things are different than they are then he will have no problem lying to you and ducking you over. Do you have any kids? Why do you think you deserve this much? We like to work hard and play hard. I've also had an interviewer ask about my religion. I don't think many interviewers have an understanding of what you can and cannot ask interviewees legally. I went to one where the entire office was white walls, not a single plant or decoration in the entire place. It was incredibly barren and depressing. It was clear they had been there quite a while too. Interviewed with the first set of people, then the boss. The boss made me wait 20 minutes before she arrived to the interview, said she forgot. Then she was insanely rude the entire time. Yeah, no thanks. I am not working in this hellhole. If they start talking about recruiting people, just run. I once had an interviewer ask me, do you ducking smoked weed? Turns out it was a fake job. Also everyone was wearing hoodies. If they offer you the job right on the spot, especially after a short phone interview, getting the job on the spot can either be a blessing or an indicator that you're gonna be a tool from the start. Saw a post once that the interviewee asked what the job would entail and the interviewer couldn't answer because the answer was illegal. I'd say if they can't tell you what you'll be doing, that's a huge red flag. The interviewers are covered in blood, but don't acknowledge it. If they forget they schedule you for an interview, then run late for the second. We're a family here. Code for we want you to take this super seriously and let us treat you like shitty, give you long ass hours, and no scheduling of your shifts, and will be personally affronted if you even attempt to attain anything that resembles work-life balance. We have many opportunities for promotions. Either people are quitting left and right or the job you're applying for isn't the job you're going to be doing for very long and they're going to be moving you around a lot without a raise. When they ask for any money, having to watch the interviewer's kids. My ex-manager had goofed up and scheduled an interview with a new hire but forgot her kids had a half day at school, so rather than cancelling the interview she just brought them to it. My manager then went and did paperwork in the back while this poor girl had to babysat her 3 kids for the next half hour until the interview could actually start. She did get the job, but I'm not sure why you'd want it at that point. I applied for a job as a delivery driver at an Indian restaurant while I was in college. Halfway through the interview, the manager ran outside and stopped the ice cream man to buy all his employees ice cream. I took the job and it was probably my favorite job to date, despite the long hours. This is more of a green flag, I know, but this question made me think of that. If the term "we're like a big family" comes up, you're likely not going to like your boss or co-workers. When everything in the process is inflexible and on short notice. Many years ago when I was teaching I got an interview for the next day, went and interviewed, we'll let you know. A few days later I went to visit family about 4-5 hours away. They called me and said I was wanted for a follow-up interview. Be there tomorrow morning. I explained I was out of town and asked if we could schedule for a couple days later. The position didn't start for months anyway. Nope. They said I was one of 2 candidates and if I wanted it I needed to be there tomorrow morning. I had to borrow my parents' car to drive down there for a 20-minute interview where they were late and clearly hadn't planned anything specific to talk about. I took the job and that kind of disregard for their employees and shitty preparation was every bit their standard practice. I didn't even find out the specific subjects I'd be teaching until the first day of school. It was 4 subjects, including 2 electives almost completely unrelated to anything I took in college. I've had a few WTF interviews recently. One, I ask at the end if there's anything in my background that concerns them about my ability to perform the job. Controller says yay, you have no M&A experience. It was 1 bullet out of like 15 for the job. Why bring me in then? He clearly didn't review my resume prior. Huge waste of time too. I went through 7 rounds of interviews for an assistant controller position that had 0 direct reports. So really not an important role to put you through 7 rounds. At the end of the 7th round, every single employee told me a decision was next. HR scheduled a touch base call with me, so I figure sweet. In getting an offer, I get on the phone and it's a brand new HR director who immediately starts interviewing me on the spot, then tells me I need to come back for an 8th round panel interview. Told them to duck off. A manager will say I hope you stay with us and not quit. Not a good impression on a new hire. How often do you think it's okay to get sick? That was a no-win for me. How exactly do you answer that question? I think it also meant the previous employee abused the sick leave policy a lot. Interviewer is not prepared for the interview and or seems uninterested. They talk shitty about their employees, ask you to do a task for them at home to evaluate your skills but seem not interested in you at all. They will take your work and not hire you. An interview goes both ways. It's not just you who is being tested. If you have a bad gut feeling, listen to it. The position is advertised as one thing, and that's what you applied for, but you're interviewed for something completely different. I once applied for a secretarial position. That's what was advertised. When I got to the interview, I was being interviewed for a door-to-door sales position. I noped out of that interview within 5 minutes. I had an interview once at a bookstore and had specifically applied as a bookseller, cashier basically. The interviewer was late and kept me waiting for about 20 minutes, and she looked bothered by my presence. She sat leaning back in the chair with her arms folded across her body in a very defensive position and looked everywhere but my face. She barely asked me about my experience 3 years at a bookstore that had just closed, and basically told me that they were looking for someone to work 4 hours a week in the cafe as a barista. The job advert was for 20+ hours a week in the regular bookstore. I told her this and she said, well, all we're looking for is a barista for 4 hours a week right now. So I said, okay, well, that isn't what I applied for and I live 30 minutes away. 4 hours a week will barely cover my gas to get here. So I will have to decline as it is not worth it for me. I didn't feel bad about being somewhat rude considering her tone and posture the whole time. A Scientology test to determine if you're a worthy candidate for the job. I took one unknowingly. I thought it had kind of strange questions but didn't think too much of it. It wasn't until months later that a co-worker, in front of our boss that had given us the test, informed me that this was a Scientology test. The test is called the Oxford Capacity Analysis if you want to see the questions. Our boss denied knowing that this was a Scientology test. I suspect he was lying. For what reason I'm not sure, as he himself had worked for the company for at least 10 years. How do you work for a company for 10 years and not know the owner is heavily into Scientology? I still work there. We did some Scientology related courses after I had been there for a few years. They were pretty ducked up, sitting 3 feet in front of another co-worker and saying gibberish while they try to distract you, and other nonsense exercises. After that it was never really brought up by the management. We just joke about it at work now mostly and tell the new hires what we used to go through. They still give the test to new hires as far as I'm aware. I always ask them after they've been hired just to see their reaction. When they ask questions that are irrelevant to the position you're interviewing for, having no leeway in your availability. My husband recently interviewed for a call center that works with providing senior citizens transportation to medical appointments. They didn't ask a lot of probing questions and gave an office tour where he saw people dressed in stretch pants and one heavy-set guy with his gut hanging way out of his shirt. As he walked through the cubicles, workers were loudly swearing at each other in jest. My husband was offered a job on the spot but declined. He ended up at a nicer hospital appointment call center with someone who once worked at the other place. Apparently not only was the other call center raggedy AF, but the job itself sucked in that they weren't providing great service to the old people calling, telling them they had to take the city bus, etc. When the interviews don't introduce themselves or shake your hand. My last interview, the interviewer just walked me into her office and started talking. We finished the interview. She never shook my hand before or after. They called a few days ago and said that the person who interviewed me would love to have me back. When they said her name I had no idea who she was because she never introduced herself. Awkward phone call, only to decline the position. It was also weird to see everyone in jeans and gym as hot working in a medical office. Glad I didn't choose that job. What's your 5-year plan? Sheesh. Dude, I don't know. I'm not omniscient and have no way of knowing what life will throw at me in the next 5 days, let alone the next 5 years. My plans for the moment are limited to getting enough money to eat on a regular basis and not cry when I look at my bills. Asking about your experience in an entry-level position. You are applying to be a matador but they only have bright purple and green flags. They want you to do a test to prove you know Excel or some equally stupid bullshit. Or they want you to take a personality questionnaire. Special irony points if the test instructions are unclear and you can't clarify because they've left the room, leaving you like the confused John Travolta gif.